Good afternoon, everyone. This is Katrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique, and this is a master class today on some tubular peyote that I'm going to teach you guys how to do in order to create this beautiful little triangular beaded bezel for a 12mm Swarovski Rivoli. Now you can use any colors that you want for this project, but you'll need the following materials. You'll need at least one Rivoli, size 12mm. Doesn't have to be Swarovski, it can be Preciosa. You're going to need two colors of size 11 Delica beads or any other type of cylinder beads that are size 11. You'll need beading thread. I will be using some Nymo size B in this beautiful tan color. You'll need a beading needle, size 11 or 12. If you're using Nymo thread, which I recommend for this project, you will also need some microcrystalline wax or wax of your choice to condition your thread. Because this is a master class, I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with peyote stitch, because I'm going to be moving along at a pretty rapid pace during this class. To begin with, I went ahead and unwound a full wingspan of my beading thread off of my spool. I pre-stretched and conditioned the thread prior to threading it on to my size 11 beading needle. We're going to pick up two of our accent colors, which I'm using these silver lined gold, my Yuki Delicas, and then 7 of our main color, which I'm using just regular metallic bronze, my Yuki Delicas. These beads constitute the short side of the triangular shape that we'll be making here. Then you're going to pick up 2 more gold and then followed by 11 of your main color. So 2 more accent beads for the corner plus 11 beads for each side. So you'll pick that up twice. So once I have picked up my beads, I'm going to double check to make sure that I have the right amount. So I have 2 gold. And there's 7 of my Delicas for my short side. 2 more gold. 4, 8, 11. 2 more gold. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. I'm going to carry all of those beads down towards the end of our beading thread. And then we're going to form a loop. So you can either pass through all your beads again before you tie these beads into a knot. I'm just going to go ahead and tie my beads into a round by tying 2 overhand knots. So when you're tying that second knot, make sure that your knot falls in the same place right between those same 2 beads. Just like that. Now we have to get into position to begin doing our beadwork. So the first thing we're going to do is take our needle and pass through the very first gold seed bead that we picked up. Without picking up any beads, just move into that position. So I'll be beading around clockwise for right now. So I'm going to pick up 2 of my gold beads and I'm going to do what's known as an increase. So I've got my 2 beads on. I'm exiting between those 2 gold seed beads. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass through just the next gold seed bead right there. And this is how we build the corners and increase the beadwork. So you're going to pull those beads down into position, and they look very similar to a herringbone stitch. And you want to set them as neatly as you can so that the bead holes are facing upwards and they're stacked on top of the first 2 gold on your base row. Then from here, you're just going to do peyote stitch down to the next corner. So you'll pick up your bronze, skip over a bronze, and sew through the next. And you'll peyote all the way down until you reach the gold beads. Make sure that you are skipping over 1 bead per stitch. Position your beads as you work and try not to let the beads twist around on you. As you reach the next corner, the last bronze bead that you pick up, you will pick up the bead, skip over 1, and pass through the first gold bead of the next corner. Then you will just simply pick up your 2 accent colors and do another increase at this corner by passing through the very next bead, but just the gold bead. Just like you're doing a herringbone stitch. If your beads get twisted, you'll want to work with them till you get them straightened up so they sit nicely. You don't want that thread twisting. Sometimes, if you find that you're unable to straighten out the twist, that means you've accidentally passed under the thread bridge below. So you'll want to pull your needle off, take that stitch out, and then try again. The easiest way to keep that from happening is make sure as you're passing through that you can feel the needle sliding across the outside edge of that bead that you're stitching through. Then we're going to simply peyote down to the next corner. We'll pick up, our next bronze bead, skip the first bronze bead and go through the next. And the same thing applies here. If you find that your work is trying to twist on you, you'll need to make sure you're not accidentally passing under the thread bridge as you go through that bead. And that's all you're going to do. You're going to peyote down here. You're going to do an increase when you get to the next set of gold by picking up 2, passing through the very next bead, then peyote down to this end. All right, I've worked my way around, and now I'm at the end of the round. I know I've come to the end because I've got a 2 bead stack sitting here at my corner, and that's where I started the row from. So now as I add my last bronze peyote bead, I need to go through the very first gold bead and then step up through the second one. And that's a little bit of a tight corner, and you really want to be careful here and make sure that you do not twist your threads around and pull your beadwork out of shape. If everything is working the way that it should, you'll notice here how flat this beadwork is laying from this previous round. It looks pretty decent. So now, basically, we're just going to do an increase, and we're going to keep working the same exact technique for 7 more rounds, for total 7 rows on the beadwork. If you are familiar with peyote, you'll know that when you pick up the first beads at the very start, before you tie them into a circle, those beads are going to constitute rows 1 and 2 of the peyote beadwork. As we worked that next round and did our first increase, and peyote stitched these bronze beads all the way around, that actually constitutes row 3. And I can show you how to count that out. So to count the number of rows that you already have on peyote stitch, you start at any bead on the inside edge. So we'll start with this bead. So we have, this is the first row. This bead in the middle on the diagonal is row 2. This bead here on the outer edge is row 3. So basically you're just counting on the diagonal like this, from the inside edge to the outside edge, to see how many rows you already have completed. So here we have 3 rows completed. We know we need to do 4 more rounds, just exactly like we did the very first stitching round. We'll pick up 2 beads at the corner, go down into the next gold seed bead. And then we will position those beads before we move on. We want these to look just like herringbone stitch, because basically that's exactly what they are. We use that stitch to create the increase at these corners. Then we're just going to peyote with our bronze beads all the way down to the next corner. And we're going to continue on, like I said, until we have a total of 7 rounds finished on this peyote beadwork. It's important to remember that as we reach our first corner, when we pick up our last bronze delica bead, we're only going to sew up through the top gold bead from the previous round. We only do the step up at the end of the round, so we're sewing up through just that top bead on our first corner. And then we'll pick up 2 gold. Pass down through the gold bead on the opposite side. Position our beads. Make sure that they're not twisting on us. And then move on. And we'll do that at this corner as well. And if you get confused about where you are, you can count the rows of gold beads. So there's 1, 2, 3. This is where I started each row. Now I have 3 here. So I'll work down to here, and I have to add one last set of gold beads. Peyote up this side, and then do the step up through to here on the first corner I started from. It's really important also as you're working with these nylon threads, or any thread for that matter, as you get to these tight corners, you'll want to make sure you pull this working thread down out of your way, because you don't want to sew through it and split that thread. If that happens, you're going to have to unthread your needle to remove that, and then rethread and try again. It's also really important that you don't let the beadwork, the working thread, get hung up on the beadwork. Like you can see, I just now accidentally flipped that working thread around. So now I'm going to have to, before I pull that bead into position, I'm going to have to pass my needle through that little loop. And these are just important steps to watch as you work, so that you don't have to go back and take the needle on and off constantly, because it damages this nylon thread fairly easily. So now I'm up to my next corner, and I'm ready to do my last increase. I'm picking up my 2 gold. Notice how I hold the working thread here, pulling it back out of my way so I don't accidentally split the thread. Put those 2 beads in the corner. Sometimes it helps me to position them if I flip my work over like that. Then flip it back before I resume my peyote stitch. Then I'm pulling that thread back again this way towards myself as I do these tight stitches here on my corners, to make sure I don't run into a problem of splitting the thread. Then also at these corners, this is where you're going to want to make sure that you pay really close attention. Make sure that this thread isn't looping over your corner beads, because later on, if it does, you're going to notice you have exposed thread here, and it's really hard to sew back through and correct that problem. So now that we have a couple of extra rows done, it's a little bit easier to get through these 2 beads at the end of the round when you need to do your step up. So picked up my last 11-0, and I'm going up through both of the gold beads. This is the one I need to sew through to complete the round. This is the new one on my increase, so I have to do a step up so I can start my next row. If you have trouble going through both beads at the same time, you can go pass through them one at a time. It doesn't matter, as long as you make sure that you don't cross under a thread bridge and cause the bead to twist. All right, so now that we've got that extra row done, you can see that the triangle, and you can actually feel that the structure is taking nice shape. It's much firmer and much easier to work with. So now I'm working on the 5th row, and I'm just going to let you guys watch me for a couple of seconds. I'll show you how I get a nice rhythm of utilizing the palm of my dominant hand here to, as I pick up a bead, before I go to stitch, I grab the working thread, pull it out of the way to make sure that I don't stitch through it on accident. As I'm sewing through that next delica, I try to make sure I can feel my needle scraping the top outer edge of that delica bead so that I know I'm not crossing the thread bridge underneath. And that just makes things go much smoother. Takes a half of a millisecond to make sure that you're getting that thread out of your way. And if you can make yourself get into the habit of that, it's going to make your bead weaving on these peyote projects go much, much better and faster and look better. All right, so I'm going to continue on down this long side, do my increase here, come back up, and then I'll do 2 more rounds after that for a total of 7. Actually, when we do the 7th row, we're going to do a little bit something a little slightly different at the corners. So make sure after row 6 that you come back and check the video before adding your 7th row. So as you're counting your rows, make sure that you're not counting just your sets of at the corners, because that's going to put you off it. Right here, I've just completed my 5th row, but I only have 4 sets of these gold beads. Because like I said, when we picked up all of our beads at the beginning of the project, that we picked up beads for row 1 and 2. So what you really need to do to make sure you can keep up with how many rows you have is count out from center to the outer edge on the diagonal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm done with 5 rows. I have one more row to go then my final row. So that's 2 total, but I'm going to come back and talk to you before I start that 7th row. All right, so I have my 6 rows done. The only difference of this last row, instead of picking up 2 beads at the corners, we're just going to pick up 1. So we are going to pick up 1 bead, 1 gold bead, accent color, sew through that next accent color, just like we did when we picked up 2, but we're only picking up 1. And we're going to do that at each corner. Then we're just going to peyote down the sides, just like we have been doing throughout all of our rows. We're going to just pick up 1, sew through the next sticking out bead. When we get to this corner, we'll pick up 1 accent bead, sew through the next one, peyote down, pick up 1, sew through the next gold bead, and then peyote down. When you get to the very end, go ahead and put your last bead through the just through the 1 gold bead from the previous row, not this little accent bead yet. So I have worked my way back around and I'm getting ready to add my last bronze bead. And like I said, because we didn't do the increase here, we really only have to sew up through the gold bead from the previous row to complete the round. And here's what your beadwork should look like at this point. We'll count our rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have our single accent bead from row 7 sitting at the top of our little herringbone corners. So as I was working, I was sitting here thinking about what I'm actually doing here on this project. And right now, this is my tail thread. So you can check your work to make sure you don't have any exposed threads or, any problems with twisted beads or anything like that. But you can see how this is more like circular peyote because basically we just tied our beads into a round. And we kept doing our increases so that the work comes out. It's still a piece of flat work. But it was the circular peyote technique that we used, not necessarily tubular. All right, so let's take a look at our project. A lot of the shape peyote videos and classes I have seen available online show you how to do these shapes in something like this, where you would sew down into the center here of the beadwork. And as you worked around, you would be working from this side on the center towards the outside edge here. You would continue doing the increases in the corner, and then when you got 6 rows on, you would zip the 2 sides together to form this tubular shape. And this is why this is more, this style is called tubular peyote. This is more just like circular peyote because we're actually going to work this in 2 separate pieces of beadwork. So now that we've come this far, we can take our little rivoli and we can see how we're going to frame it on the front side of our project.